We're talking about the respiratory system today. And you've already learned a lot about the respiratory system when we did the circulatory system, because we talked about how the blood vessels come to the lungs, and there's exchange through the capillaries, and so you get oxygen at the lungs and you get rid of CO2. So you already know that, and we've already kind of even talked about the trachea in class, but let's go over this stuff again. The ones that are circled are the ones that you absolutely need to know. So here's the nose, or the spot inside the nose is the nasal cavity, and you've got a nostril. Oral cavity just means mouth. You've probably heard of oral hygiene. That means you should brush your teeth. So that has to do, anything oral has to do with the mouth. The pharynx you've also heard before, because when we did the digestive system, we talked about the throat back here. And the pharynx is just this area behind your mouth here. It connects to the mouth, it connects to the nose, even connects to your ears, connects to the trachea. And the esophagus is right behind the trachea, right here. So if you put your fingers to your throat, you put them on your neck here, you can feel bumps. Those bumps are actually the trachea, and probably if you feel your Adam's apple, you can feel part of the larynx too. So those bumps are cartilage. The trachea has cartilage in it, and it also has muscle. Whereas the esophagus, which is behind, which we talked about in our unit on the digestive system, esophagus, this is really a muscular tube. The esophagus is muscular because it doesn't have to stay open. It just opens when you swallow food. The trachea is your windpipe. It's the tube that brings air up and down. You need that to be open all the time. If you have an obstruction here that blocks the windpipe, you die pretty quickly if you can't get that out. So trachea you have to know as the windpipe, and larynx is the part of the trachea that does your talking. So this is the voice box. Down here you'll notice that the trachea splits into bronchial tubes, that one goes to one lung and one goes to the other one. And these things I had mentioned in a previous unit, these things branch. And so they keep branching into smaller and smaller and smaller tubes till finally there's no cartilage at the end, it's just muscle, and you end up at these little circly things called alveoli. And I'll show you that on the next slide. Each one is an alveolus. So here's the right lung and the left lung, and this thing called the diaphragm is a muscle, and that muscle has a lot to do with your ability to breathe. So we'll talk about these things. General function of the respiratory system. You already learned this really when we did the circulatory system. So it's to supply the body with oxygen and to get rid of or dispose of carbon dioxide. So if you look at this picture at the top, this is the very bottom of the tree, the branches that come from the trachea. And here are alveoli. So when you breathe in, you're bringing nice clean air inside, hopefully. Here's blood that's coming to your lungs, just came from the heart, right? It's coming to your lungs and it does not have oxygen, so it would be dark red. When they branch off into all these teeny little capillaries, you get oxygen exchange. And so if you look right at one of these, this is a picture of it. Here's the air that's in the lungs. This is the air that's in the alveolus. So alveolus. This is the inside of one of these sacs. And then see this blood vessel right here? That's a capillary, and that's what this is. This is a capillary. And so what's happening here is carbon dioxide is leaving the blood, and oxygen's coming into the blood from the lungs. So the oxygen is going to be coming from your mouth all the way through your lungs into your bloodstream. And notice this is a cell, the thinnest kind of cell there is. This is a type of epithelial cell, and all you have to do is have the oxygen diffused from here through one cell membrane, a little bit of cytoplasm, and one more cell membrane. And then there's another, it doesn't show it here as well, but there's another set of cells right here. And so these are, again, just like these cells, the thinnest possible cells. And so your oxygen is going to diffuse through two more cell membranes and then get into your bloodstream. It'll have to go inside the red blood cell and attach to hemoglobin. These really are very thin. It doesn't take that much time for this to happen. And so oxygen goes from where there's a high concentration of oxygen to where there's a low concentration. Whoops. Get rid of that. Just kidding. I don't know how to get rid of that. Here, that worked. Okay. So anyway, you're going from where there's a lot of oxygen. So we're going to say high concentration of oxygen to where there's a low concentration of oxygen. And it's just going along partial pressures from, I think it's 45 millimeters to 22, I think. Anyway, it's going from high to low. Carbon dioxide does the exact opposite. So this is blood that's been all over your entire body. It's gone into the right side of the heart, and it's got a lot of carbon dioxide. Remember, carbon dioxide is a waste product made in that process of cellular respiration. So cellular respiration starts off with glucose, and you need oxygen. And if you want to put the number 6 before that, it would be better. Makes 6 carbon dioxides, makes water. I should draw this better. Makes 6 waters, and then it makes a whole bunch of ATP, which at this point you've already learned, so I can write the number of that in. There are, I should put it ahead, but anyway, there are 36 or 38 ATP depending. So the point is, you make CO2 in all your body cells, then it goes into your blood, and here it is. You've got a high concentration of CO2. It leaves, and it goes from high concentration to low concentration, and then you breathe it out. Actually, you know what? I think my numbers were wrong. I think it's the carbon dioxide goes from like 45 millimeters of mercury to 23, something along those lines, and oxygen's more like 104, or no, you know what? 120 to 104. So the numbers really are high to low. You don't need to know the numbers. I'm not even positive that I have them right. But you're going high concentration of CO2 to low CO2, high concentration of oxygen to low concentration of oxygen. So you're taking oxygen into the blood that's leaving your lungs, and you're taking CO2 out of the blood that's going to your lungs. So the blood that's leaving has lots of oxygen and very little CO2, whereas the blood that was coming to your lungs has lots of CO2 but very little oxygen. So they're opposites. Organs of the respiratory system. Aren't kids cute? So the first organ is the nose. And the point of the nose is to moisten air and warm air up. So that's not so important on a warm day, but on a cold day, it's kind of a big deal. It also filters or cleans the air, so particles stick to mucus in the nasal cavity, and the mucus contains enzymes, lysozyme, and defensins to help destroy bacteria. The cilia, there are also cilia in the mucus, so the cilia moves the cilia on the cell membranes, and that helps move mucus to the pharynx, so you can swallow it or so you can spit it out. Larynx is the voice box, and so it's a bunch of kind of complicated, not complicated, but specialized types of cartilage, and then inside you have membranes that make up the voice box. So here are the membranes. This is when it's closed, and here's when it's open. And if you picture any musical instrument, the way you make music is to bang a drum or move a string. Let's look at a stringed instrument. Let's say I drew it right. Let's say this is a guitar. Oh man, it's a really bad guitar, isn't it? Here are the thingies to make the strings tighter. Anyway, you're going to pretend with me here. When you move a string, what happens is that it moves the air molecules. So you're making air molecules come close together whenever this is vibrating. And then there's a spot, when the string goes this way, it makes the air molecules get compressed. When it moves this way, you're going to have an area with less air molecules. So you have denser and less dense molecules. And that's what makes sound. When that hits into your eardrum, it pushes the eardrum, doesn't push, pushes, doesn't push, pushes the eardrum. So that is caused by these, they're not strings, they're vocal cords, these things vibrating the air around them. Cool, huh? Okay, the trachea, that's this thing. So this is a flexible tube. It's held open by rings of cartilage. It's a type of cartilage, you don't need to know that. But here's the thing, look at how it branches off into these little branches. So the pink ones must be the cartilage, because eventually all you have is the muscular tube. The bronchial tubes look sort of like a tree branch, maybe upside down. They provide a pathway for air, but they're too thick to allow for oxygen or carbon dioxide to diffuse into or out of blood. So the thing that you're seeing here in blue is all just a bunch of tubes that bring air into the lungs. When you get to the very end of the tubes, you see these things, the yellow things here. Those are called alveoli, and you can see them here better. Alveoli provide a tremendous surface area for gas exchange. Gas means oxygen or CO2. So you're bringing oxygen out of the alveoli into the blood, and you're taking CO2 and putting it from the blood into the alveoli. So the CO2 will come back out, and oxygen will come in every time you breathe. Whoops. Okay, so if you look at this, Here's the alveolus, and here's the duct, the end of the bronchial tube. So here's the duct. And these things are cross-sections of alveoli, so you can see this enormous surface area here. Here's an alveolus, and there are little blood vessels that are around them. Here's another alveolus, and it's really hard to see, but there's blood vessels around them too. So capillaries surround each air sac, or each alveolus, to pick up the oxygen and to get rid of the CO2. So again, all these little red things are the capillaries. Here's the respiratory membrane. That means the amount of stuff, or the membranes, that oxygen or CO2 have to go through. So in here, this is the sac. You've got oxygen in here, and that's got to go through the membrane here, which is the alveolus, and then another membrane here, which is the capillary, and then the membrane in the cell of in the red blood cell. So here's a better picture of it. There's the tiniest little cell, the thinnest possible cell that you could have. So that's for the alveolus. So the oxygen has to go through 1, 2 cell membranes, and then the thinnest possible membrane that you could have. Right, this is a cell. Here's a cell, right? If you squish that cell, you're going to get a very thin cell. So oxygen has to diffuse through the cell membranes here and here. It would be this and that for the capillary. And then it just has to go through one more cell membrane to get into the red blood cell and find the hemoglobin. The same thing for CO2. CO2 is carried more in the blood, a little bit in the red blood cells, but mainly just in the blood. It's carried as something called the bicarbonate ion. Anyway, that has to go through these two plus these two membranes to get out to the alveoli. So the summary of respiratory phases. Pulmonary ventilation, that means moving air into and out of the lungs, or breathing. So external respiration means gas exchange between the lungs and the blood. And transport, this is a transport of oxygen and CO2 between the lungs and tissues. So we spent quite a bit of time on this one before. So here's blood coming, whoops. Oh, sorry, here's blood coming from the body. So here's the body, there's your head, and here's the body, this is your abdomen and your legs and stuff. Blood comes to the through the inferior and superior vena cava, but here's the thing, the right atrium, you learned that, into the right ventricle, out to the lungs, to that lung, and to that lung, where it gets oxygen, comes back into the left atrium, left ventricle, and then out to the whole body again, or out, you can see the branch here, to the bottom of the body. Internal respiration, this is gas exchange between systemic blood vessels and the tissues. So you don't really have to memorize these different parts, but I want you to get the idea. Let's flip back a little bit. I want you to get the idea that first you have to bring air into your lungs. And then you have to exchange air between the lungs and the blood. And I don't care if you know those words so much. Then you have to carry the blood around the body. Then when you get to the body cells, you've got to get the oxygen into the cells and get the CO2 out of the cells. So oxygen is O2, that's this. And this is CO2, carbon with 2 oxygens. You're bringing that out. And if you have the words internal respiration, don't worry about that too much. Okay, quiz time. Are gases exchanged here in the trachea or the bronchial tree? So pause this, think about what you want to answer, and then restart it. So here's what I'm asking. And the answer is no, it's too thick. You only get gas exchange when you get to the alveoli at the very end. So this stuff is way too thick for air to diffuse out of. Where are gases exchanged with blood? And the answer here is the alveoli, those teeny little sacs of air. What most directly brings oxygen to your toes? Most directly. I guess I would go with blood for that one. So the air has to go through the trachea, or the nose, maybe first the nose or the mouth, and the trachea, then the alveoli. But the blood is the thing that brings it right to your toes. All right, and that's the end of the story for the respiratory system.